Hello and welcome back to Lost in Chronologically Lost. I'm David,
I'm Matthew.
and today we're going to be looking at episode 4, 1974 to 1977, day 1. So, first off, Matthew, what did you think of this episode? Good, bad, better than the rest?
I liked it. I think what this episode did for me was it wasn't the first episode where I really got to continuously see like the main cast, but I sort of reached the point where like now I'm actually like even though I don't know what happened to them before, I know these characters. I'm invested in what happened to them, and I think it wasn't even a particularly special episode so much as this was like the catalyst, the point where I started to get that connection to the characters, and so it sort of became a different experience for me now. So I enjoyed it for that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Personally, I was not really a fan of this episode, mostly because this entire episode, well, obviously, when you saw it in real time, it was split up across a couple different episodes. But here, you just get the kind of transitory period between flashing through time and 1977 plot, as you can probably tell from the fact that it's titled Day 1 of
Yeah.
1977.
Yeah, and
So
I don't want to dwell too hard this episode on trying to piece together the timeline, but so just a few thoughts about that. I don't think I'm going to get. I think that what we saw in terms of like when Locke fell into the well and like the well and holding the rope, I feel like I'm kind of missing some of that in that I didn't see how they got back from the past when they like got far in the past and saw a statue. But I don't think I'm gonna get anything more with that. I think it just implied that another flash brought them here.
Oh, well, yeah, so this is where the episode starts off, is they flashed to 1974, and I will say, it is Locke turning that wheel down there. It stopped the time flashes, but it also brought them to 1974.
So it specifically brought them. Yeah. And the other
I don't
thing,
know if specifically, but it caused one more flash,
okay,
that brought them
one
to
final
74.
final flash like Vegeta. Anyway,
Yes, exactly.
anyway, the other thing that I think I will get some more of is what happened in between them flashing away from talking to Richard in the 50s and then when they were looking for the well. Because when they were looking for the well, they said something about Charlotte knowing the well was there. So I think we're going to get something like that. And I guess by this being chronologically lost, I know wherever they time traveled in between that, it's going to have been, it's later than the 70s where we are. So I guess I'll have to see that eventually. I don't really know when.
Right, exactly. It is, it'll be complicated. Piecing together all the time skips in this format is quite difficult. I will say you've pretty much seen the most important ones, except for the first time skip, where the inciting incident. I'll say.
Where they just start to get flashed.
Right.
Did they ever meet themselves?
I guess we'll have to see and find out. So yes, this episode begins. They've time flashed to 1974.
Yeah,
They know
I think
that
it's
their
implied
headache
that
is gone. Locke
so it's
fixed
like
it.
when they get flashed, is it that they get heal? I was thinking, is this that the flashes are healing them, or maybe just the headaches were a consequence of like what Locke fixed, what was broken before he fixed it.
Yeah, the headaches were just a consequence of like time traveling, basically.
Yeah.
And now they've stopped traveling, so they're fine.
Yeah.
They're locked into a place.
So so when they said John did it, and I was kind of wondering, like, John did what? Why did they need John to do something? And I was thinking at the time, like with the guy in the suit who was telling him to, like, get people and bring them back to the island, which I still don't fully understand. But, with that, I guess now I realize, oh wait, what John did was just stop the flashes from happening. They needed to stop the flashes from happening because that was, like, an awful experience.
Right, exactly. I mean, it killed Charlotte, and before we get to that, Sawyer is saying, well, now we just have to wait for him to come back. And they're like, well, but wait for how long? And he's like, well,
Yeah,
as long
because
as it takes.
I don't understand like what the comeback means. Like they're not waiting for when Locke originally made it to the island. I don't think so. It's got to be like when time travel Locke coming back, but then is that just part of the timeline? I don't know. I'll have to see.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing.
You know, I will say this is like later seasons Lost, right?
Correct. This is, I think,
So-
everything we've seen, other than a little brief snippet, is season 5.
So I know the show has a reputation and not everyone likes like the direction it goes in, but experiencing it this way, I'm fine with it. But I imagine when you're like 5 seasons in and then it's like, oh, we're stuck in the 70s and Locke is like left but has to come back. I can see like for some people that may have gone too far from the original premise for them.
Yeah, some people, once it gets to the time travel, people are like, this is ridiculous, this is... So, but other people, like me, think that season 5 is probably the best season when you just watch it normally because, well, the 70s and the time traveling is about half the plot because you can't be lost without having 2 different plot lines in different times.
Yeah.
The plot was so much more straightforward and going quickly, and so many things happened that I really enjoyed it. And I know there are other people who did too, and then there are other people who thought it was trash.
Wait, so you say 2 different plots in 2 different times. Is that like there's another subplot that would be happening concurrently with this that's just like in the present with like the other half of the cast or something?
Yeah, and because the usual format for the early seasons was modern day on the island plotline and then flashback plotline. And, you know, eventually they ran out of flashbacks. So, and they had too much plot, so it had one half plot, the other half plot. So
Yeah. And I was wondering that, like, you know, this gang, Sawyer, Miles, Juliet, it's like, and I forget his name, and Locke, I was wondering, like, is this the core cast of the show? Is this who I can expect? Is this, like, the people I'm gonna need to know? Or is there just a whole other group of the main cast that I've seen nothing of yet? And, like, at this point, I have no way of knowing, except you telling me.
well, I mean, you know, at the end of this episode, you see some 3 brand new faces.
Yeah,
so
that I do. That I do.
Yeah, we'll get there. But right now,
Yeah,
at
let's
the beginning
leave
of the
that for
episode,
later.
we cut to Daniel, who is completely distraught that Charlotte has died, and he's saying, you know, I'm not going to tell her. I won't, because he
Yeah.
thinks, you know, if he doesn't tell her, then this timeline can't have happened or something. But
Yeah, he's coping. He's coping.
yeah, so they're stuck in 1974.
And I think he says like she moved on and we stayed, and I'm not sure if that meant just she died or like something magical with the island and time travel. She somehow moved on. I don't know.
I think it's that because she died, she couldn't time travel with them anymore. Is that again? That's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And so they make a thing saying, oh, we'll go back to the beach because if they're coming back, then we'll go look for them. And
You know,
I
I see a word in my notes. They mentioned the orchid, and now it's in my notes, but I don't remember what
right, I'll
what
tell
they
you the
meant.
context. 'Cause I remember this exactly. Is so he's saying go back to the beach, and Miles is saying, all right, then once we're at the beach, you can find a reason to come back to the orchid because those are the only 2 plans that you ever have. Which
Yeah.
when I was watching season 5 of this show, I was like, yes, thank you for calling it out. Every plan in the show, most of the time, because they just need a reason for things to happen. Is oh, we need to go back to the beach. No, we need to go somewhere inland. No, we need to go back to the beach. Like, just keep them always moving. So yes,
So-
there's something called the orchid, which
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
I
going to
guess
say more than that because the show hasn't
Yeah.
said more than that.
it makes me have to wonder what it is, but I also just looking at my notes, I had forgotten the details of how it was mentioned. But anyway, so they go and they hear gunshots, and a woman is getting shot. And what I liked is a line from Daniel, where Daniel says, like, I think they said, like, I thought we were not supposed to interfere, and Daniel's just like, what happened, what happens, happens. And I guess what that tells me is, at some point before, Daniel thought that this was a try not to interfere with the past or you'll create a paradox or a new timeline, but now he has come to understand that no, it's a fixed timeline. Whatever they end up doing is what already happened in the past.
Exactly, yeah. Whatever happened, happened. It's an important line for Lost. I believe it was a title episode for one of the episodes during
Because
the series.
you do need to make it clear to the audience and to the characters that like you're going by fixed timeline rules.
Right. So, Juliet and Sawyer, they each shoot.
Yeah, I
one
like the whole
others.
Sawyer just like drop the gun. Guy just turns and tries to shoot him. Doesn't even say anything. And Juliet shoots him. Juliet is like badass.
Oh, I'd say, at least in terms of action, most of the girls on Lost are pretty badass simply because they have to be, because they're in these scenarios where you're not going to live long if you're not. So Sawyer comes to them and she's like, who the fuck are you? And he's like,
and it
we got in a shipwreck. So
yeah, and so they know they're in like the Dharma Initiative and others period of the island, and so this got answered later in the episode, but it had established that Juliet was an other, and I just had been wondering, like, was she someone who was on the island working as an other before the plane crash, or is she someone who like joined the group after they got stuck on the island? And it did answer like, oh, she was one before, and that does make me wonder, like, is it meant to just be a coincidence that people who got stuck on the island in our main cast at the start of the show are like some of them just were people who had already been on the island? If that's just a coincidence, honestly, it's fine, but I'm wondering if it is one or if there's, like, more meaning, like they planned it.
It's hard to say, especially at this point, only in episode 4, Chronologically Lost. So I'm just going to leave you with your own thoughts on that one.
Okay, that's
I don't
fine.
think I could say anything without spoiling. Yeah. So, the woman who...
She wants to bury the people that got killed.
Well, they say they have to bury them because of the truce. They can't let them know that they killed them.
Oh, I don't think I picked up on that at the time.
Yeah, so there's a truce between the Dharma and the
I
hostiles.
I got the truce. I got the truce later, but when I was watching that scene, I didn't get it. I just thought she was someone who's like, oh, dead people deserve to be buried. But okay, this makes more sense.
No, it was to hide the bodies.
Yeah.
And they mentioned that Sawyer used to lie for a living.
Yeah,
if that gives you any idea
that's...
as to what his occupation was.
I noticed that, and I said I wondered what it was. I didn't think of any theories when I was taking notes. Now I will suggest he was a CIA operative.
That's very interesting.
Or just a con man. One or the other,
Right, so they get to the sonic fence.
And Juliet... I thought Juliet would know that they were sonic... And maybe she did, but just wasn't saying everything. But I thought she knew because she had been on the island at this time. These are sonic fences.
Oh, she knew, but she didn't want to say because it would seem suspicious.
Yeah, she was hiding it from Amy, I think.
Right.
Yeah, she was hiding it from Amy, so she was like, oh, it looks dangerous, but she knew. Okay.
Right, and so, they make her disarm it, and they're like, okay,
also,
well, you have to step through first.
And they say, like, it fries your brain, and I'm like, fries your brain? So how does sonic stuff do that? Does it have the exact resonance frequency of the human brain? Okay, I know I'm complaining about something that doesn't matter here.
Right. Well, I will just say, later in the episode, Horace makes a thing saying, oh, put the fence to max level. So clearly this woman, maybe she just dropped the level to low so that she could walk through it with earplugs.
Yeah.
And they would just get, knocked out, incapacitated.
Yeah, that would explain it all. The earplugs are like, damn, bitch move. And you want to see your guys just stroll in, have the power, have their guns. But I think you can, in just this kind of plot in general, you could reasonably expect, like, the characters end up somewhere new. Like, they're gonna get captured initially. They're not, like, they're gonna be, in the people who live there's power. That's just how this plot line works. Like, so I was like, oh man, they got captured. And I'm like, you know what? This is fine. That's how it's gonna be reasonable.
Right, especially since it's not like they're thrown in jail right afterwards or something. They're just... Horace initially just wants them off the island. It's like, we'll just send you away. It's fine.
Which is, like, surprisingly reasonable. I feel like there's a good chance a lesser show would just, like, be like, oh, they put them in their prison, and, like, they don't... and it's just, like, Horace is somebody who also is like, what the hell is this situation? What am I supposed to do? All right, I just want them off the island. Like, he's acting like a human here.
Right. So he meets with Sawyer, and Sawyer, like you said, he
Sawyer?
lies for a
Good-
living. So he's like, my
good
name's
lies,
LaFleur.
like-
You know,
yeah.
we're looking for the Black Rock, which is it's a good lie
Yeah,
because
good
the Black
callback,
Rock
and-
is on the island.
Yeah, and I did wonder, like, so not that important, but I wondered, like, do they already know, like, just the main character, Sawyer and everyone, do they already know about the Black Rock, that it's on the island, and, like, how? Because that is the ship that Ricardo came on, but yeah.
Well, like he says, he not only mentioned it by name, he's like, oh, it's an 1800 slaver, so clearly he knows what the ship was used for.
Like,
so.
he makes it a believable lie, because then it's like, if it's just like, oh, we were just on some ship going for Tahiti, then I feel like Horace wouldn't trust that. But then if you turn it into, we were these adventurers looking for a lost ship, then it, like, becomes something where it's like, oh, it's kind of believable that they would end up around here, around this mysterious island. It's a very effective lie, I think.
Right, exactly. So Horace mentions, oh, we have a submarine. It's going to leave the island. It'll take you with it. So these people, they have their submarine, as we saw in the last episode, that leaves regularly and comes back.
It's just like, I think I mentioned this before, but it makes the show just a different experience, because I feel like if you watch the show normally, just the idea of being able to leave the island seems so out of reach, and I'm sure it's going to be when I get to that part of the story, but I'm seeing so much of people casually going back and forth leaving the island now that I'm like, wow, it's like, it's clearly very possible, and I will know that it's possible when I later see characters wondering if it's possible.
Right, exactly. So then we cut to the group, that's just not with Sawyer. And Miles goes, this is a mistake. He's halfway through trying to explain time travel right now.
Yeah. And, I think it's around here that I started thinking, like, I feel like I know these characters. I'm somewhat attached to them. And I want to bring this up for a reason, because I consider it like an interesting experiment. I think, like, I have wondered before if I just started watching or reading something in the middle, not knowing what happened before, how attached would I get to the characters? How much would I understand? Because it's like, if you have a book trilogy, the author, they always have a little bit of exposition in the middle of this, like during the beginning of the second book, just in case somebody just happens to pick up that one. They're going to explain the things in the world, they're going to explain things again, and that's just kind of a thing you always see done because they want to cover for that. But at the same time, nobody would want to start in the middle. They would want to start at the beginning. And so even though I wonder what would it be like if I started in the middle of the story, I never do that because I want to experience things properly. But because we're experiencing Chronologically Lost in a way that's not the original intended way, but is still interesting enough to be worth doing, I'm getting some of that, like, seeing the characters in the middle of their story, and thus I'm not getting, like, introductory scenes that are supposed to show me, like, what a character's deal is, which I think that, like, the actual start of the show probably had. And yet, despite that, having spent some time with them, seeing their personalities, seeing them doing things and struggling with things, I have come to reasonably be invested in those characters, and I think that's good and really interesting.
Exactly. That's one of the things I really liked about this chronological version, is that, obviously we're in the 70s right now, but after sort of the 70s, we're just going to be getting a lot of backstory, is that it will feel like you're slowly just building up and getting to know these characters, so that when their introductory scenes do happen, it doesn't feel like an introductory scene. It just feels like, yeah, this is how this person would act in this scenario based on all their backstory that I've just seen.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like that's just gonna be fun to watch, where, like, when they have like some introductory Miles scene, I'm gonna be like, ooh, that is so Miles,
Right, exactly. So we have a thing where Juliet, she's staring off, and they're like, what are you looking at? She's like, well, that used to be my house. So
we know that Dharma's gonna be kicked out in a few years. Yeah. And also, I like, Daniel just says, like, a metaphor, like, the record is spinning again, we're just not on the song we want to be on, and I like that metaphor a lot.
Exactly. Well, one of the things they do mention after Juliet says that was her house is that they say the others lived here and they wiped out the Dharma. They didn't say the Dharma left, they said they were wiped out. So
yeah,
bad things are coming.
And I mean, maybe that's not all the information. I doubt the others just decided to murder them all. I'm sure there were a lot of circumstances and everything, but that it did still end that way.
Right. Then we get a scene of, little Charlotte going, and Daniel just cries.
Yeah, you know what's coming. You know the scene is gonna come, and it'll be sad.
Yeah. And so
then
Richard
the
Richard
alarms
shows
go
up.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Richard shows up, and they're like, "How the hell did he get
know-
past the fence?" And he's like, "That fence may keep other things out, but not us." So
And when you see them like going into a house hiding, and then they look through the window and you see Richard just there putting a torch there, that is just good scene, good way of building that tension.
it is. I was gonna save this complaint for later. This isn't like a real complaint about the show itself. It's just about the set design, which is the sort of Dormaville, which is kind of what we call this area. It was filmed at, I think, just some like summer camp that they use.
You know what? Now that you say that, holy shit, I can see it.
Right. So the inside of those cabins for real are just a bunch of bunk beds in like one room. They're not large. They're small, but so the interior of all the houses are completely different sets.
Oh,
So
and
they show them much larger houses, and there's not that many cabins there, and they try to use different shots to make it seem like there's a lot more houses than there actually are. And again, this isn't a complaint against the show. This is just they had to work with the set that they had in Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's just what they had.
Which I mean, like on some level, using a summer camp to film something like this, like good way of producing it. Good way of doing it without it being too expensive.
Right, exactly. And it just bothers me every time there's a shot that tries to like follow them through the doorway of a house or just look out the window, because I can just tell how fake it is because they're not looking at the same thing.
Yeah, I see. Anyway, so and I liked where like Horace and Richard were like Mr. Alpert, Mr. Goodspeed. In
Yeah.
a truce, it's been broken, and it's like, and I really liked Sawyer going to talk to him. Sawyer explaining that he killed them and why, and Sawyer explaining, and then Sawyer saying like, "Did you bury the bomb? I know about Locke. I know about all that." All I have to say is, I am glad that I got to watch this scene knowing the context, because this is the kind of I love scenes like this where it's like somebody doesn't realize just who the other person is, but then the other person like will give some of their information, and the first person like reacts to that. I love scenes like that, and this scene, it's so satisfying because you have the context. And I mean, even if I watched the show in, the release order, I would still have the context, but I'm just glad that this being chronological did not take away that context from this scene, because it's so good.
Exactly, yeah. It's I love that scene where he's like, "Well, how do I know that you're not with the Dharma?" He's like, "Well, did you bury the hydrogen bomb 20 years ago?"
Yeah.
He's like, "What? Yeah,
It's like,
exactly. I'm
that
not
is-
with Dharma."
that is my shit. That is like any story that gives me stuff like that. Like, there can be stories that I am not enjoying at all, but then if they give a scene like that, I will love that scene.
Right, absolutely. This is like one of the things why I love season 5. Even though I didn't really care for this episode, I did love this scene. They make a deal where he's like, "Hey, fine, we won't really take any action, but we need to take Paul's body with us." And they get Amy to agree, and whenever she takes his necklace, because they need that necklace for the next half of the episode.
Sad decision. Why does he have an Ankh necklace? Is he I don't know. Seems
I think
weird.
it was honestly. There's nothing to that. I think it was just to throw fans something, be like, "Oh, ancient Egyptian, remember that statue?
Yeah.
Ancient Egypt."
Yeah.
But there's nothing to it. He just has an Ankh. So then they get to stay for 2 weeks. That's all they get.
Which is nice. It's like Horace. I really didn't like Horace after last episode, where I mean, Benjamin's dad was worse because he was an abusive asshole, but Horace also seemed very suspicious, and I still don't trust him, but he does seem very human in this episode, and I like that.
Right. So Juliet's saying, "No, I'm gonna leave because I've been trying to get off this island for more than 3 years," but Sawyer convinces her to stay. So Did you have any thoughts on that? That she's been trying to get off for more than 3 years.
I don't think I caught that while I was watching. 3 years, I don't know if that's... See, I don't know if that's meant to say that the whole Lost crew cast was on the island for 3 years, which seems like it might be a bit too much, or if it's like that's supposed to mean that she was there for longer. I don't know.
Right, but Sawyer convinces Juliet to stay because they're
they
gonna strike up a
love each
romance.
other.
I will say this is like the beginning of their romance. There was nothing really before this for them. This is you've seen it pretty much start on, and I will say it was kind of surprising when it first happened, but everybody loves Sawyer and Juliet together.
It's not bad. They're both like competent characters. I like seeing competency. We see plenty of that later in the episode. They both just good at their jobs.
Right. So then to kind of just break up the two 70s portions on the island, we get a little flashback that is just horrifying.
Yeah. So I did wonder, like, did the editor of Chronologically Lost know that it happens in that time scale?
Yes, it does. It's
okay,
known.
like, so it is confirmed. Like, we know the exact dates.
Yeah.
So his mom is freaking out.
So this mother is freaking out and telling her son to hide and not make a sound.
Yeah.
Because...
And so I'm like, all right, she's gonna get shot. It's like, no matter what your dad does... Well, I didn't know she would get shot, but I knew she would get killed because it's... No matter what your dad does, don't come out. So I'm like, okay, she's getting killed. And then, they're fighting. She gets shot. And then the dad comes in, very creepy and frightening to see his shoes walking around. And then he sits on the bed. And as soon as he sits on the bed, I'm like, okay, he's going to shoot himself. And he does. I found it predictable, but it was still horrifying.
Right. So this is... I don't know if you picked up on this. They do say his name of James, but this is Sawyer's backstory.
Yeah. I got that.
Right. So, I will say, this scene is so ingrained into my memory just because they'd show the scene of the Boots walking around and the dad shooting himself every time there'd be a, previously on Lost, and they'd tell you what plot lines were important for the current episode. So every time it was a Sawyer episode, you'd see they'd replay you that scene over and over. So then we cut to the funeral for them, and we see Jacob gives little Sawyer a pen to finish writing his letter.
I'm just like, okay, Jacob also just casually leaves the island, and like, see, it's like now I'm like, did Jacob plan for Sawyer to be someone he wants to bring to the island? How much is planned? How much is like all part of the plan that like everyone who came to the island was supposed to, or like, I don't know, because like what other reason would Jacob have to come visit this particular kid? And also, so that was interesting. And then also, I'm not sure if I just didn't understand something, but Sawyer, like, he writes a letter to Mr. Sawyer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy who talks to him is like, talks about the guy who did this to your parents, and I'm like, is he speaking metaphorically in that his dad became a worse person and killed, like, his dad he loved? Or is it like, did Sawyer not tell them that it was his, like, everyone else, that it was his father? Did he just say, like, a stranger came in and shot them? I'm like, why, who's Mr. Sawyer? Is Sawyer not his name yet? Is a name he took? I don't know if I missed something, or just I didn't understand how that all fits together.
I guess we'll have to see, because that is interesting that, little Sawyer is writing a letter to Sawyer. So, and, his uncle says, try, you can't just hold on to revenge like that, which,
I
wonder how that's gonna go.
I don't know. Also, I'm not sure what I'm missing. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but when Sawyer and Juliet were talking, I think he refers to Miles as, like, Mr. I speak to dead people, or something like that, and that, I think, vaguely explained that thing that I didn't understand last episode.
Right, exactly.
Where it's like, okay, that's just his thing. He sees... And I don't know if it's like he was always like that even before coming to the island, or maybe, like, the way the island shows you dead people, maybe he just has a particular affinity for that, but I get the ballpark of what it is.
Right. So we're back to Dharma. We have someone who's kind of partying with his little girlfriend watching the security cameras. They're like, oh, what's gonna happen? Are the polar bears gonna figure a way out of their cages?
Which, I didn't mention this when we did our first episode, but once they said this, I remembered one of the things you have randomly told me about Lost before is that there are polar bears on the island. Who knows why?
Right. So, but then we see Horace is drunk as fuck, throwing dynamite around by the fence.
Yeah, and they're just like, we gotta get Mr. LaFleur. And I'm like, wait a second, Mr. LaFleur, that was the fake name that he gave. Holy shit, like, just how much later is this? Have they gotten to a position of authority on this island? God damn.
Yeah, Sawyer is now the head of security as LaFleur.
Yeah. And I was even wondering, if he was even something more important than head of security, but head of security does, like, make the most sense.
Yeah, it's written on his sort of jumpsuit. LaFleur.
No, I saw that. Yeah. Right. Also, wait, I just wanted to mention, I think, when the guy was dancing with his girl, he said something about bringing brownies, and I'm like, wait a second, is this weed brownies?
It could be. I mean, I don't.
I just think that kind of fits they're slacking and doing what they're not supposed to vibe there. Yeah, they get Sawyer, and Sawyer's like, oh shit, we gotta do something about this.
They go.
And he grabs Miles.
Back. And we see that Horace is now shacked up with Amy, so that happens. And Amy...
I get the impression that may or may not have been something Horace wanted to happen before Paul died.
It's hard to know, because I believe that this scene, if you watch it, in regular order, that this scene came before we see her husband get shot. Like...
Really?
Yeah, I think because that's why they keep saying LaFleur and being so afraid and not showing him for a bit. I think that was like an episode opener, and it was like the shock reveal that LaFleur was Sawyer.
Oh wow! See, that's an experience I won't get. That is really interesting then.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where it seemed cool originally, but then when you rewatch it, you're like, they really were just trying to fake you out, huh?
Yeah, and I honestly, because I recognize the name LaFleur, because obviously I was just like, oh, it's gonna be Sawyer, but they're building the tension. And also, I like that it's like, they kind of just stayed on the island because they had to make a life here, because it feels kind of weird and wrong that they would just work for the Dharma Initiative. But then what I kind of realize is, like, they know they have to stay on the island because something important is happening. Locke is gonna come back. I don't really know, like, what they plan to do after Locke comes back, why it's important. I'm not sure if I should know, but it's kind of just like, what else would I expect them to do? They have to make a life for themselves, and I kind of just get that vibe, like, they've made a life for themselves. Good for them.
Right, exactly. Well, I will say, on this island, we see Sawyer, we see Juliet, we see Miles, we see Jin, but we don't see Daniel, so that's something.
I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah,
and it's maybe he's just doing something else on the island. Maybe he went to the others.
I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah. I can't imagine he would have left the island, because we haven't seen him being the scary man telling Charlotte not to come back.
Right. So
but
they mentioned that
I don't, because I like Daniel. I liked Daniel after the last episode. I don't know how I missed that. I think it just I still don't really have the cast intuitively memorized, so I don't think about who's missing.
Right, exactly. So they do mention, that Horace was by something called the Flame. So there's something.
I missed that. I don't know what that means.
And Amy goes into labor. And they mention something that, women, we send them to the mainland to give birth because they only have an intern here.
And it's like it's 2 weeks before due, and I'm like, okay, you should have already sent her back a month before she was due. This is kind of on you guys. But,
yeah.
So they decide they need to get Juliet. So apparently Juliet has worked as a doctor or has delivered a few babies.
Well, they said she's done a C-section, so.
Yeah, so she is an experienced doctor. I'm like, this is how I learned that about her, but Okay, that works.
But here's the thing:
And
is she's working as a mechanic.
a mechanic.
And when
So I think
Sawyer goes to talk to her, she says, every time I've tried to help a woman give birth on the island, it hasn't worked. And he says, well, maybe whatever causes that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, like, is she hiding the fact that she's a doctor from the Dharma Initiative? Just maybe it doesn't fit with their story of people who shipwrecked there.
Well, she said it was a deal with Sawyer, which makes it seem that she is hiding it because she doesn't want to do it, because clearly she's had some trauma in trying to deliver babies here before.
Yeah. And I did wonder, like, so something, I mean, it's just a guess Sawyer makes, but given that the baby is delivered successfully, maybe it's a guess for a reason. But I still wonder, like, what is the thing that prevents babies from being born properly on the island then? Because I have no idea what the hell that would be. And I also wonder, when she talks about delivering babies on the island, is that referring to when she worked for the others and was there earlier? Or is that referring to just, like, when she's lost on the island with the whole Lost gang and babies? They were pregnant people.
Well, I guess we'll have to see for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they mentioned they're still searching the island to see if anybody's there, but they're clearly they're out of it. They don't think that they're really gonna find them. They're just kind of staying there. And so, Juliet, she helps deliver the baby. It goes fine. And we see that Sawyer and Juliet are, romantically together, living together in their little house. Yeah, in their little bunk bed house.
Very nice for them.
And so, Sawyer goes to wake up Horace, and it's basically...
it feels like we've gotten to the point where, like, Sawyer is somebody that Horace trusts and relies on, which is, like, again, like, he's made a place for himself, and it's, like, good for him. Like, he's become somebody who belongs there socially.
Right, exactly. And so he catches Horace up on what happened, and Horace's whole reason for getting mad is that he's like, is 3 years long enough to get over someone? I have to imagine that if you see your husband get shot right in front of you while you're on a romantic picnic, you're just kind of not going to get over that. Like,
I'm just thinking, like, a dead husband is something where, like, if you marry somebody who's a widow, you have to kind of respect that they're, like, you can be together and love each other, but they're always going to keep a place in their heart for the person they lost. That's kind of just what you have to be ready for.
Right, but basically that was all just set up so that Sawyer can give a monologue about how he had a thing for this girl and he missed his chance, but it's been 3 years now and he doesn't even remember what she looks like.
And it's like it's been 3 years, I think, that they've been working for the Dharma Initiative about.
Right, 74 to 77.
I gathered it was that. Yeah, so because of that, it's like, I'm like, at first I was thinking, like, oh, is this a backstory thing? But then when I realized that, I'm like, no, this is somebody who was his romantic interest, like, during the main plot of the show. And then I start to wonder, like, I think when we saw, I don't want to talk about it yet, but when we saw people show up at the end, one of them was a girl, what if it's her? And what if, like, we get drama then?
Right, what dramatic irony would that be, that right when he's getting over her, she comes back?
I didn't consider that earlier, I just consider that right now while we're talking.
Right, so then we cut to a new guy in the jungle whose name is Jack, and he's in a full suit.
Jack, he's in a full suit, and I think they talked about being on a plane, which I'm just like, I don't know how people getting on the island fully works, but if he was on a plane, and then he's lying there in the jungle, he did not fall out of that plane and land.
Well, like they said, do you guys remember crashing? And they're like, no, there was just some light, and then we woke up here. So another thing is that, when Jack wakes up, you see he has a torn little piece of paper that just says on it, I wish. So...
I did not notice that. Wait, huh.
Yeah, it's gonna be a while before you see the rest of that piece of paper.
Okay, yeah. I will mention, I don't, like, look away from the show a lot. Like, I pay attention and I rewind if I miss stuff, but I do look, I have 2 monitors right now, so I set that up specifically for this, actually, but I do look back and forth between the show and where I'm taking my notes, so I can miss little details.
Right,
like that
and also, I know what details to look for. Like,
yeah.
So obviously
so
I'm going to catch more.
Yeah.
So, there's
so then you see someone drowning.
Yeah, in a lagoon drowning, whose name is Hurley, did you find out? So Jack goes and rescues him. and finds this girl Kate, who's also on the shore there.
Which just, like, I mentioned, like, this is where in the show I started to just know the characters, follow what's happening with them.
And then they introduce new ones.
And just when I have a grip on things, they have to just throw something I don't understand at all into the mix.
Right.
Because I feel like that's gonna keep happening for a while in Chronologically Lost. So we get that, and like, so because I don't understand anything, I'm first like, do these people even know each other? Are they like strangers who are on a plane who just also happen to come onto the island at this point in history in the 70s? Or are they people from the main cast? But like, if they're from the main cast, how are they on a plane? Because if they're on the main cast, they would have ended up on the island earlier than this, like earlier in the show, but then like in the 2000s. How did they end up here now? Was it a flash? I just don't have enough to work off of here.
Well, like they said, is after that light, I woke up in the jungle, so...
Yeah. So if maybe a flash took them while they were on a plane, but how did they get on a plane if they were people who were stuck on the island before? And then Jin shows up, and they recognize him. And for one thing, I just want to mention, out of the current main cast, Jin is someone I haven't got a lot of, so I was excited for like maybe this to involve Jin's character more. And when they recognize him, like, are these people from whatever Jin's backstory is, like whatever he was involved with, or is it just like more people from the main cast? I don't know.
Right, well, we'll have to see. A lot of that is all tied together you've tied that together in a very complicated set of knots that I'm not sure how to untangle just yet. So
yeah, I'm throwing out a lot of questions here in a way where you could probably like answer one question, but you couldn't answer all my questions in a satisfying and non-spoilery way.
Right. Well, I will say one thing is that when Jack wakes up Kate, she says where's Sun and Saeed and where's Ben? So they had other people with them clearly that they don't know where they are, and then they meet up with Jin. So it was like next episode.
Ben, I was wondering, is that the kid in the Dharma Initiative? That was Benjamin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm wondering if that's the same one. I mean, most shows do not give duplicate names, so. Yeah.
Right. I will say there's one singular duplicate name in this show, and I will say it's not Ben. It's not even that bad of a duplicate. I mean, it's because one of them goes by Charlie and the other one goes by Charles, so it's fine.
Those have very different feels to them.
Right.
But like Charlie is like childish, Charlie Brown. Charles is an old man name. But anyway,
next episode, episode 5 is 1977, day 1 to day 2. So we're at the place now where we're only covering like one day.
So it's gonna be this. I will be able to follow the plot, and I don't understand how these new people played into the main cast and how they ended up here, and how they ended up on a plane and then here. But I have a feeling that, assuming that like they all know, these guys don't just know Jin, they know Sawyer and Miles and Juliet, then I think, and Daniel, but then I think Sawyer and Miles and Juliet being like, them being in like a position of power and having a place in the Dharma Initiative, and then suddenly having more people they know show up, I think that's just going to be more something I enjoy watching. And I don't know how they'll explain them knowing each other. I guess they could try to explain it via like, these were more of people on our crew, and we finally found them. But I feel like Horace will not believe that.
Right. After 3 years, that would be mighty suspicious.
And he's in a perfectly nice suit.
Yeah, exactly.
What if them coming here? No, that wouldn't make sense.
No, what were you thinking?
I was wondering if it connects to Locke bringing people back to the island, but like, why would? But these guys seem like they're from like the 2000s. They're not. This is not them in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Very interesting.
But there's more things I don't necessarily know how to piece together. Like, all right, random theory, very unlikely, but something that could explain it with what I understand right now. I don't think anything contradicts this, but I'm sure there are things that contradict it. I just don't know them yet. What if earlier in the flashes, these guys were part of the group getting flashed, and they ended up in the 70s, and then they managed to leave the island in like the late 70s. whereas, Sawyer and everyone didn't end up getting to leave the island. And then because of that, when Locke leaves, then he can end up in the 70s, and then he gets these people back to the island by getting them on the plane. But then, no, see, then wouldn't these people react like, oh shit? Yeah, we didn't get an oh shit, we're on the island again reaction. You know what? I just don't know what to make of it all.
Yeah, you have a lot of things. I will say, some of it will be answered quite shortly. I don't know when shortly, but sometime in this 77 plot line.
I think
so.
It seems like something that they will talk about, especially as they explain their sides of the story. Like Sawyer's group and now Jack's group, they explain their sides of the story.
So you've had some expectations and some thoughts. So I just want to say, for next episode,
also,
do you have any?
Also,
I was going to say, what do you want to see happen?
Well, I don't think we're going to get it next episode, but I think in the next few episodes, we're going to see what happened when the Dharma Initiative got killed and removed from the island by the others. And I just want to see, these new people who got here, they get introduced, and it's all like reuniting and explaining things, and then, people making sense of things, I think that'll be entertaining to me. It'll be both entertaining and very enlightening.
Yes, right. Well, there's one character who will be extremely enlightening, and I'm not going to say who. So you have that to look forward to. So is there anything else you wanted to say about this episode or your thoughts for the future episodes?
I think that's it.
This has been episode 4 of Lost in Chronologically Lost, and I hope that you join us again for episode 5, 1977, day 1 to day 2.